There's no point in trying to fix it. You cut it off and go on to the next one, because you've learned a valuable lesson by making that mistake. Let's not do that again. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do that taper. So I'm working right on the edge. I did a couple hits this way, rotate. Alright, so I'm going on with my twisting and turning. Just working that point out. Alright, so I'm going to mostly cut it off here. I can see that place. I'm going to come down, and I can tell by the color, see it's getting cooler right where I'm hitting. So there's my almost cut off nail. So that's what you'll do with yours. So we want a good bright orange when we do this part. So I break it off, come over to my hole, come straight down, and then I like to turn my hammer to get facets on there. Immediately when we dump it in the water and that shrinks the nail up out of the header, I tap it just a little bit to raise the head up a little bit and then dunk it again, because I know it's going to be hot right under the head where it was in the tool. So that's not as pretty a nail as my first one. But once that's driven in the wall, all you see is the head, so even if it's off center, you know, they're still nails. It still holds something. First of all, I only want to hit, that's enough metal to make a nail. If I hit one hammer blow back behind that, I've reduced the thickness of this piece of metal, which based on the size of the metal and my nail heading tool I know will cause me a problem, because if I reduce the thickness back behind where I want the head to be, it's going to go farther into the tool when I try to make the head, and it's going to go deeper down into the tool, and I won't end up with as much metal as I need to make the head. It's going to go too far in. So the object here is to only hammer the very end of the piece of metal. Now how do we do that? First of all is hammer control, knowing how to hammer. A couple tricks to make it easier. If I try to hammer back here, it's very difficult for me to hammer on the end of that piece of metal, because what I end up doing is hitting the anvil with the far edge of my hammer, unless I've got really good hammer control. So how do we avoid that? We avoid that by putting it right on this edge of the anvil. If I hit right here right now, I can't help but hit my piece of metal, because there's nothing but air over there. The hammer doesn't have anything to hit, so when I come down, my hammer is going to hit the only thing it can. Now, if I turn my hammer this way, where am I going to be hitting?
Yeah, that's going to make a mess.
I'm going to be hitting back here. I don't want to hit back here. I want to hit out there. So what am I going to do? I'm going to tilt my hammer slightly. I'm going to pick the piece of metal up, not like this, but just so the back end is off the edge of the anvil. That's going to help me a little bit too. This hand is doing nothing but making sure the piece of metal is where the hammer is going to hit. I don't aim my hammer to where the metal is. I move the metal to where my hammer is going to hit. Another key thing. So I'm also not standing like this. This is very difficult to put that hammer out on the end of a 3-foot lever arm and have control over it. If I stand right here, I'm picking the hammer up this way. See the difference in the body mechanics? It's a whole lot easier. Less stress, less strain, much more control to hammer, and I can see what I'm doing better. So we're going to concentrate on only hitting the very end by tilting our hammer and being on the edge, and slightly tilting your hammer. Now when you're this way, you can control the face of the hammer by dropping your wrist or picking up your wrist. See how I'm hitting with the back edge or the front edge? This way it's just a slight twist of the wrist. I'm also going to be telling you, if you put your thumb up here, I'm going to keep whacking it off. It's a bad habit to get into, so we try to break you of that right from the start. You think this gives you better control, but what it actually is doing is transferring the shock of the hammer into your thumb, into your wrist, into your elbow, all the way up your arm. So we actually really want sort of a loose grip. We throw the hammer at the anvil, make sure the piece of metal's where it's supposed to be so the hammer hits it, and actually keep a loose grip. We don't have a death grip on the hammer. That also transfers the shock. There's a whole lot of body mechanics, and you're not going to catch all of this right now, but I'm just telling it to you. At some point down the line, if you do continue in blacksmithing, you'll remember some of these things and think, oh yeah, now I understand. So the other thing we do is we don't hammer all four sides of the nail. I hammer this side, and then I rotate my wrist 90 degrees, and I hammer this side. I don't go on around, I go back. As I hammer the top, the anvil automatically hammers the bottom. So I only need to worry about two sides, not four. So whatever your wrist configuration is, I usually start with my thumb on top and turn my wrist that way, but some people, it's easier to start some other way, but I'm going to harp on you on this too, 90 degrees. And if you don't do straight 90 degrees and keep that taper square, you'll have problems later on. It wants to roll or fold then. So you don't want to rhombus, you want to try to keep it square. The metal in the hot spot, I don't poke it down in the fire because that's not the hot spot. I don't lay it on top. It's in the middle, which is where the hot spot of my fire is. I want to get a good bright orange. Everybody talks about red hot. Red hot to a blacksmith is nothing. Red hot is when you quit hammering on it because it's too cold to do anything. Red hot, 500-600 degrees, 700-800 depending on the kind of metal. When it quits glowing, you're not going to do any good hammering on it. So we want a bright orange, bright yellow. We want 1800, 2000 degrees. So people always say, when we pull it out of the fire bright yellow, they always say, oh look, it's red hot. It's not red hot, it's way above red hot at that point. Your kitchen oven goes to about 500 degrees, and you really can't get any metal glowing at that temperature. Burner on top of the stove, you may have gotten a cast iron pan hot enough to actually glow at some point in time, that it is possible. It's just about the range of what a kitchen range can do is about where the metal starts glowing. Alright, so that's not really hot enough yet. Here's red. There's sort of dull orange, bright orange, and a really bright orange at the end. I want to see almost a yellow. We go by color, everything we do. Forge welding, you go on high yellow, almost white, depending on the metal. Now the other thing that you're going to do is you're going to go hit, hit, turn, hit, hit, turn. Just because it's hard to do what I'm doing. And people always say, well, how many times do you hit? You hit 3 times this side, you hit 2 times that side. This hand has to recognize, we want to keep this taper even. So if I've got one side wider than the other, when I'm hammering this side, it's going to get wider. So I turn it back and hammer this side, it gets wider, which narrows the other side. So all I'm turning based on when it needs to turn, not how many hammer blows I've hit. I could hit one really strong hammer blow and need to turn it. I could hit 4 light hammer blows and need to turn it. So the object here is not hit, hit, turn, hit, hit, turn, hit, hit, turn. The object is to keep hitting with this hand, because all it's doing is picking up the hammer. This hand is responsible for moving the metal where it needs to be and turning it. So it's hard to get into the rhythm I was just in at first, but probably by your 3rd or 4th nail you'll understand that too and be able to do it. But at first you're going to do hit, hit, turn, hit, hit. And again, you see I haven't hit anywhere above my mark. I don't know if you can see the hammer marks that are there, but basically that's the last hammer mark on that side and that's the last hammer mark on that side. Everything above that is still round, full round. So that's what we're striving for. Point, and again you can see I haven't hit anywhere above those 2 sides line up. You see that little half moon? So that's what I'm looking for. Now when I put it in the tool, it looks like I would want to cut it about where the half moon stops, because that's enough. I want about 1/4 of an inch to make that head. But I know that it's going to go down into the tool a little bit farther than I expect it to. So I'm going to cut just above And when I bring it out to cut it, I'll be able to see where my hammer stops. So again, I'm doing this by eye because I know what to look for in the piece. So I'm going to cut it where it needs to be cut. If you cut it all the way off, if I cut all the way through here, what's going to happen is that little nail is going to shoot across over there if I make that last cut. So what I'm looking is to cut it almost all the way through. When you do yours, it's going to take you several heats to do the point. It's going to take you one more heat to heat it to do the cut. We're not going to cut all the way through at that point because then you're going to put it back in with it stuck on the end of the bar to heat it one more time. When you bring it out, you're then going to poke it into the tool, break it off, come to the anvil and do your head as a separate step. So I'm going to heat it again because when you upset that head, you're pushing the metal back on top of itself and making it fatter. That's where you need a lot of heat. This is actually pretty soft wire or soft metal, so I could work that point after it gets a little too cold, but upsetting the head, no way you can do that cold without really damaging my hammer face or the tool.
Because once you break it off, you can't heat it again.
It's very difficult. It can be done. You can take a pair of tongs and set it in the fire, but it's a little tiny thing at that point. It's very difficult to find. In most cases, it's easier just to start over. So the other common thing that you'll find is you'll cut off the head with way too much metal. You'll end up with a ½ inch sticking up. And unless your first blow is dead straight down, it's going to fold. You're going to probably hit a glancing blow and it's just going to fold right over. So you'll end up with a hook instead of a nail your first time or two. So that's fairly common. You'll either end up with finished nails, no heads on them, or a hook nail with the hood head bent over.
The Alamance Makers Guild is a group of talented and creative makers located in Alamance County, North Carolina, and is sponsored in part by Harris Educational, makers of reinventing science kits like Reinventing Edison Build Your Own Light Bulb.